suggested, the Amargosa River Basin has the Amargosa River pupfish. A little farther south is the desert pupfish. That's the one we get closer to our region. The Shoshone pupfish over in Nevada, the Devil's Hole pupfish. And so this region is just populated with this amazing diversity of these little teeny tiny fishes. And so as you can imagine, if you are in Tecopa, California, and you have a hot spring in your backyard, and that hot spring happens to have a teeny tiny fish in it, and you're looking for something to do with the hot spring in your backyard, and you think a really great idea to bring economic development to your community is to have a hot springs resort there, right? It makes sense. Why not use the resources that are local to you? However, it was that very hot springs construction by some of the families in Tecopa, California, that caused the extinction of this pupfish. And so I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm not trying to say something is right and something is wrong. But there are folks who would argue that maybe we didn't need to preserve this teeny tiny fish. And maybe the livelihood of those families is more important. And so this is not a clear-cut case like with the blue whale. This is a more nuanced conversation. Can you go to the next slide? So this nuanced conversation is very active. This is a quote that was in the news last week. California is going to have to ration water. You know why? Because they send millions of gallons of water out to sea, out to the Pacific, because they want to take care of certain little tiny fish that aren't doing very well without water. Raise your hand if you recognize that quote. That was Donald Trump, our president, talking to Sean Hannity on Fox News last week about, well, we talked about a whole bunch of stuff, but in particular, he's referencing here some of those decisions that we make in California in particular. Water rights in California, it's a very heated debate. The whole Central Valley needs water for the crops, and he's referring to the Delta smelt, which is an endangered species up in the San Francisco Bay Delta, and it needs fresh water and is at risk of extinction due to drought and human land use, just like the Tecopa pupfish. So I just put this here, not to dive into politics, but just to say that these conversations are happening now. And they're happening now with other teeny tiny little fish. So this is, although we're focusing on a single species today, these conversations are ongoing. And as we have more of these springs drying, more of these endemic or native endangered fishes are going to be at risk. Dr. Recart? So Dr. Recart González was thinking that this would be a great opportunity to hang out, to learn how to cross stitch, and after she teaches us, to split up into our breakout rooms and just chat about this stuff. I don't know how I fall out. I don't know how you do. There are so many issues here to think about. And here are some questions that we came up with that might be good to guide our discussion about some of these issues. The first is, why do we conserve? Why is this important? The environment, different ecosystems, some species. How do we pick which species to conserve? In some cases, we can't conserve it all. We only have so much money to purchase land. We only have so many resources to dedicate to saving habitats. And with the Tecopa pupfish, the fourth and fifth questions are particularly relevant. We're asking questions about ecosystem protection versus species-specific protection. So what makes it worth saving this fish, right? What is it? And should we preserve non-charismatic species like this fish? Or should we preserve other species that maybe have more value in terms of human appreciation of the environment? What is our responsibility to be custodians or stewards of our common home? And how do we meet the needs of the environment versus the needs of people, especially when those needs come into conflict? So these are really tricky questions with no right answers. And there seems like there's no better way to talk about those than while cross-stitching. With that, Dr. Recart González.
Thank you so much, Dr. Burisma, for all of that background. So I hope that you, while you're cross-stitching in your own groups, you think about these questions and you're able to use them as a way to generate conversations with the people that you will be cross-stitching with. The other goal and thing that I want to keep in mind is be respectful of each other's perspectives, right? Like some of you may have already thought very deeply about these things, some of you may not, and that's okay. Allow yourself to be receptive of other people's opinions and to be respectful of those opinions. I know that in here, there's no right answer, right? That's why we have this discussion, because it's not a straightforward conclusion that we're gonna achieve, right? But hopefully through having these discussions, you can inform your perspectives a little bit better and maybe push them in ways that you haven't really considered before. For me, when I think about cross-stitching, you'll get to a point where it's like you're just going with the flow, right? So that's the perfect time for you to start really thinking about it without having to worry about making the perfect argument for whatever it is that you want to say. Just think about it like what's in your head and then just share it with your peers. So with that, I wanted to actually talk about cross-stitching. So what I want to do now is I want us to open the kit that we got in the mail. I'm gonna try another thing here, and that is that I'm gonna hopefully do a new share of my phones because I have a station over here, and then hopefully we can get that going. Okay, give me a second. Okay, and then let me share. Come on. Oh no, I don't think it's working. Let me try to reshare, and let's go into, it should, yes, okay, this works, perfect. Okay, are you guys seeing my phone? And my little image? Okay, so here is everything that we had on the mail. So what you're gonna see is you're gonna see all your thread. It has DMC is basically the brand that I got us for the thread that I purchased. So if you're low on any of these, you shouldn't. But if you're low on these, you could always go to Joann's or Michael's and purchase using this exact number, and it will give you exactly this color. You all should have a needle. So you should have a needle. It is a round tip, is not sharp. The idea being that what you want to do with your Ida cloth, this is called an Ida cloth, is what we use in cross stitching, is you pass the needle through the hole. You don't want to pass it through the part where it's still woven. So you can see there that there's squares, right? And it almost looks like a grid system. So you want to pass that needle through the hole. And that's why the round tip is very useful for that. You'll see your cross stitch hoop or embroidery hoop on your kit. You'll see a piece of felt. I'll talk about that more in a second. It's about the finishings. And then here you'll see the main item. So you'll see the pattern. So this pattern, like I mentioned before, if you want, you can add the subspecies name down here a little bit. And you can use some of these letters to base it out of. But the idea is that you have a color pattern and you're basically matching whatever square there you have a certain color. You're gonna match it over to what you're seeing here. So before I start with this, let me show you some slides. So again, I'm gonna stop this share and I'm gonna share my second screen. Okay, so you should be able to see the slides. So what else will you need? You're gonna need a pair of scissors, or something sharp to cut your thread. That will be another thing that you'll need. The other thing that I wanted to talk about real quickly is the difference between cross stitch versus embroidery, because I get this question a lot and I think it's worthwhile to answer here. And for that, I'll go back to my iPad again. And I'm gonna show you what I think it's a good example. Okay, so let's do the screen mirroring again. Then can you see me? Or can you see the screen? Can somebody unmute themselves because I can't see?
Yes, we can see.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you. So this is cross stitch. And you'll notice that in cross stitch, what we're doing is we're doing X's. We're doing X's all throughout. So all of this is filled with a bunch of X's that happen on this tiny little grid. You pass the thread from the bottom to the top, and then from the bottom to the top. So that's what makes cross stitch cross stitch. That's why we use Ida cloth in cross stitch, because Ida cloth has that pattern of that grid system already embedded in it. There's different sizes of Ida cloth. This in particular, the size is 14. If you click on increasing the number of your Ida cloth, you're making this square smaller, smaller, and smaller. Embroidery is different in that you don't have that grid system. You basically trace something that you're interested in doing, and then you go in with the thread and you basically fill out the space however you want to. And there's different stitches associated to this. So this one, you have more freedom to do whatever you want, and then you have many different stitches that you could do. So that's the difference between embroidery and cross stitch. So you see that it gives, cross stitching kind of gives it a pixelated kind of feeling, whereas in embroidery, it could be filled with so much detail that it looks very like real life. So that's the main difference between the two. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, and then another difference is the needle that you use. So for embroidery, you want to use a sharp needle because you're going to be piercing the fabric, whereas in cross stitch, you use a round needle because you're going to be passing that needle through that hole that I showed you. So I'm gonna go back to my other share. Then I wanted to tell you a little bit about your final product. So again, in cross stitching, you're making X's. So that's your goal, to make an X. So even though in your pattern, it seems like it's filling out the whole space, you're basically passing the thread from one corner to the other corner. And you do it in a very specific, particular way. And I'm gonna show you in this slide. So in this slide, I'm telling you like the first steps I'm doing the cross stitch. What you do is this here, I'm calling it the back stitch, but it's really like the back side of the hoop. So here you have this thread, and then this thread is gonna come up through the front side of the Ida cloth, and then you're gonna pass that thread to from the lower left to the bottom right. And then now it's on the back side, and then you pass it down so that you can get exactly to that lower left, and then you pass it to the lower left, you pass it to the upper right, and then you keep on doing that over and over again. So I'll show you how to do that so that you have an idea of how it looks like. So again, let me share my other screen. Share. Okay, and then hopefully you're seeing things here. Okay. So what I'm saying, right, is that you're gonna take some thread, and I don't want you to use your thread right now. I'm just gonna be describing this with the simplest way possible. I'm actually gonna be using a thread with a lot of contrast so that you can see what I'm talking about. Oops. Give me a second. while I do this, do you guys have any questions for me?
That was great explanation. I loved the diagrams.
Oh, great, that's good. Okay, so I'm ready to grab my needle. Threading a needle through a camera is harder than it seems, but I will try my best. I like to use my saliva to thread it. Let's see if that works. Haha, okay, did it. Okay, so this is what I was trying to tell you. I'm gonna exaggerate it. Let's pretend that we have, and I'm gonna slightly, let's say that this is I have a big X, it's a huge X, right? Right now we're making tiny X's. But let's pretend that this Ida class is as big as this 4 dots that I put in it. So what you do is you take your needle, right? My needle is threaded. You poke it through the back side. So poke it through the back side. You bring it to the upper right, and then you pass it through. You move that thread. Keep in mind, right, to be able to keep that, the thread without moving, you're gonna now have to hold that thread on the back. So now we're looking at the back side. I'm holding my little thread with my thumb. Okay, so I'm holding it, see? And then what I do on the back side, I go back and I find the other hole. This one's gonna be a little bit complicated with how I'm doing it, but you'll see here that I pass it through. And then what you do is to finish it, you go back to this side here. And so you'll see that you'll have an X, right? And then on the back, you have one line that goes through it. Now, when you're making a row and it's of the same color, instead of making this X's like that, you can keep on going to your next part, right? So remember that I was telling you, you go lower left to upper right, lower left to upper right. You continue doing that through the color that you're working with. And then once you're done, you go back and you fill out this other X. So then you'll be going from the lower right, which is this point here, to the upper left. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so let's look real quick. Let's look real quick at the rest of the infographic, okay? So now this is what I just showed you, right? You keep on going from the bottom to the top. So bottom left, upper right, go down right on the back side, and then you pass your needle through. And then now you're on the lower left and you go to the upper to the upper right, and you keep on doing that pattern. Once you're done, let's say that you're done with the row of color that you wanted to do. Then you do the same thing, but on the other side. So now you'll see here in gray what I just did, right? I did all that work. And now what you're doing is you're passing your needle through so that now it's landing on the bottom right and moving to the upper left. And then it comes out in the back side on the bottom right, going to the upper left. And you can see it here. At the end of the stitch, so that this doesn't come undone, you pass your needle through all of those little rows that you were making. And I'll show you how that looks like by sharing my screen again. I wish I could do this more easily. Okay, let me go to my phone again. Let's do that thing where I do a screen mirroring, and I do that, and then hopefully you can see it. Okay, so that we have that X. I'm gonna show you maybe on, I'm gonna do this one. I'm gonna take this out. Okay, I'm gonna take this out. Okay, so this is the Tecopa pupfish that you're gonna be doing. I did this so that I make sure that you have the right thread. And then what you're gonna be seeing is here, let's say that I got done with my needle. So let's say that I finished the stitch that I wanted to do. You should always end your stitch in the wrong side of the fabric, right? So let's say you have that there. Now you want to cut it. So what you do is you pass it under the threads that you were working with. So you kind of go and you poke your needle through a little bit through the back work that you did. And then when you pass it through, right? When you pass it through, it will look like that. And then it's a little bit tight. And then once you do that, you can cut it with your scissors. And then that way you're not adding glue to your cross stitch. It's all threaded work. Does that make sense?
Dr. Recart González, so when you thread it through, it doesn't matter what color we put our needle through, or do you want to put it underneath the same color?
You can put it wherever. So if you ask me, I don't care. There's people that are very proud in how their backstitch looks, meaning that they want to have this type of pattern that you're seeing here, where it's like up and down, and not this type of work that I did there. It's really up to you how you do the backstitch. I don't look at my backstitch, and I honestly don't care much for it, so I wouldn't mind. But I know of people that will be like, oh, it needs to be equally as pretty as the front that you're gonna be showing, right? So this is what I care about, but there's people that care about both sides. And if you're one of those people, then you may wanna pass it through the similar color thread or something like that. If you're like me, you can pass it under whatever you want.
Okay. And passing it through is how we tie it off, right?
Exactly. So you don't tie and cross stitch, you just basically pass it under. And that's why sometimes it's good to take your time to pass it under a couple of them, right? And kind of like squeeze your way through it so that when it comes to the other side, it has passed through a couple of them and there's a lot of tension in it. Does that make sense?
So how does like the first one tie itself, like the very first one, if it's the beginning, if that makes sense, because it's like the long one?
Yes, that's a great question. So I will answer that in a second because I'm gonna do a little bit of a demonstration on that. Let me make sure that we're covering everything that I wanted to cover before I answer that question. But let me reshare this presentation and I'll answer that in a second. Okay, so do you see how in the front view, the one that you like to hang, you're gonna see your crosses. And then in the back view, usually you're just gonna have like two parallel lines going this way. And that's because of the nature that you're doing it, right? When you're traveling your thread, sometimes this may not always look this way, but if you're doing a single line, right, it should look this way. And then Tiffany, to answer your question, when you're holding that thread on the back, right, this thread that we backed here, when you're threading it, if you keep on holding it and you're doing a couple of stitches this way, you're basically tying it with this thread that will come up. And I'll show you how that looks like in case it's hard to see. Okay, so I wanted to give you some guidance on the finishing, because I know we're not gonna get to that, because I know this is probably gonna take a little bit more than 2 hours to finish, but at least it will get us started. So for finishing your cross stitch, you can go into this YouTube video and it will show you one of the many traditional ways of doing it. Remember that cross stitch is an art of fabric and needle and thread. And most people that do that kind of craft, they don't like glue on their garments. They don't like it. They like to finish things the way that they have done everything, which is with more thread and more fabric. If you're that kind of person and you care about the back of your stitch, I highly encourage you to watch this video and to use the felt that I provided you to be able to seal your cross stitch. If you're like me and you're a little bit desperate with your cross stitching, you could also glue it. So, and by that I mean that it will look like this. It will look hollow. One caveat is that your threads are gonna be exposed, so you need to make sure that wherever you put it, things don't get ripped apart, right? But I could show you, I could stop sharing so that I can share my wall of cross stitches here. All of these, they have nothing on the back. So that is glued in, and you can see all of my cross stitching. I like to do it this way because it gives more of a flat surface to it than adding the felt. And so when I hang it, it hangs nicely on the wall. So you'll see that all of mine are with glue, but if you want to do glue, no glue, that's really up to you. Just know that you have the felt material to be able to make it pretty like the other one. It does take a little bit longer. So if you're desperate like me and you want to hang it, you may want to consider gluing it instead of stitching it, but up to you. Okay, so lastly, let me finish this. Okay, how are you doing in time? Okay, so what I want to do now is do a couple of things. So I show you the basic of the cross stitch, but you're probably wondering now, like, well, how do I transfer the pattern to my Ida cloth, right, to the fabric that I gave you? So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna show you how to read the pattern. I want to let you know how many threads you're going to be using and why we're counting the number of threads. And then I want you to do the first set of stitches in this room before we go into breakout rooms and start talking about science and extinction and all those things. So I want to make sure that this is my last slide, and it is. So I'm going to be on the phone. So at this point, I do really want you to start looking at your hoop and to do things with me together. If you have questions, I can't see the computer, so I do need you to shout it out and tell me what is it that you're having questions about, okay? So this is what we're gonna do. I want you to take your Ida cloth. So you should have your Ida cloth and you should have your hoop. Your hoop is gonna come probably sealed, right? So to unseal it so that it's not all tight, what you do is you unscrew it, and then these two things should detach. The way that we put Ida cloth or any cloth on a hoop is you put the hoop that's smallest, you put it under, and then the fabric, you put it on top of that, right? And then you kind of want to center it. Again, I may not do this well because I'm looking at it through my phone right now. But you
wait, Dr. Recart González, really quick.
Yes.
Is there like a specific side for our cloth?
No,
or is
no
it the same?
It's the same. Although Tiffany, that's a great question because I do want to show you something. So when you're putting your hoop, your bigger hoop, the one that has the screw, there is something that I do. And because, like I said, most of, if not all of my cross stitches are made to be finished in this hoop, and then I just glue it to it. I don't move it around. I do make sure that there's an alignment. What I mean by that is that this fabric is center on the back, and then this is center on that fabric. But I do want to make sure, let me get a pointer here. I want to make sure that this thread, this line that you're seeing here, right, that the Ida cloth is somewhat centered so that it's ready to hang. So let's imagine that you put a nail through here on your wall, right, to hang it. You don't want your Tecopa pupfish to be all crooked like that. So if you move it like that, when you're making your cross stitch, it's just gonna look all diagonal. So what you wanna do is you wanna keep everything at 90 degrees with your top of the hoop. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so again, I'm gonna do the best of my ability. It does take a little bit of unscrewing this and learning how much to unscrew it, but you basically push it down. Hear that clank? It's okay to be rough. And then what you do is you kind of pull it all together so that it's all nice and tight. And as you're doing that, right, at a point you need to start screwing in to make your bamboo hoop very, very tight. And then you keep on stretching it. And you want to stretch in all directions just so that you don't distort the grid system that you have going on. For Ida cloth, it's very hard to do, especially on the size of a cloth. But if you're working with other materials, that might be an issue. So just keep on screwing, keep on tightening. How are we doing with this process?
Good.
Good, thank you. Okay, so how many of you have this ready to go? Is that a yes, like an absolute yes for everybody's ready? Or are you not answering because you're busy doing it?
I'm still stretching.
Yeah, still stretching,
Okay,
but
sounds
almost
good.
there.
Thank you for letting me know. Okay, so I'll wait for you, and while I wait, I'm gonna do some other things. Okay, I'll just wait. Okay, let's see. I have some time to look at everybody. Everybody looking at your cross stitch. Oh, it's so amazing. You guys are working. It gives me so much happiness to see you doing all of this. Yay.
So then do we just screw back the screw on top?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And you keep on tightening and stretching. You want it to be very tight because you're gonna be pulling out all the force back and forth, right, with your needle. So you don't want it to be all wobbly. The idea of the hoop is to make it so that it's easier on you so that you're not dealing with like a piece of rag that has a will of its own.
How do you
It
stretch?
doesn't, so Madison,
Pops off.
can
Right.
I see a little bit?
Yeah, I can show you.
Thank
So I have
you.
it like this, and then when I just pull it like that to stretch it.
No, so you kind of like have to pull it. So let me show you on the camera. So you have it like this, right? I did notice that you're leaving a little bit of fabric on top. You want it to be like equal lengths of fabric on each side so that it's center.
Okay.
So make sure that you do that. But when you're tying it, you want to do this motion, not this motion, because that will make it pop. So you want to move it in this direction. See the side that I'm pulling?
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of do it like that. I don't know if you guys have done with like drums or pianeras or anything that's a musical instrument. You have to like tie the leather to the hollow drum, right? And so then you can kind of almost hear a little bit of music coming out of it. And that kind of like gives you an idea of like how good it is. So what you want to do is you want to have some bounciness of your fingers coming out. You don't want it to be so soft, right, that when you hit it, it goes under. See, it's kind of like going under. You don't want that. How are we doing?
Good.
Awesome. Thank you, Diane.
So it's good if it makes that little drum sound.
It's good if there is like, it's almost like you can move your fingers on it and just like move it and there's nothing sinking on it. Okay. I don't want it to sink. Because if it's sinking, you're gonna have to readjust again and again. And to be honest, like my cross stitches is like passive least resistant. It's meant to watch TV and cross stitch, not to like re-hoop it again and again. So
what was your first creation?
My first, I don't know, I may still have it here. My first creation, this is like slightly embarrassing. This is my first creation. It says hardcore. I found it on Pinterest. It's a little apple. I could show it to you here. I still have it though. And then you can see like how messy everything is back here. Okay, so is everybody with me? Should we continue to do the next step?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Perfect. Yes, okay. So I told you about reading the pattern, right? So what I want you to do is I want you to take your trusty little needle and I want you to think about the very center of your circle. Now, when I was doing this for the first time, I would freak out about like, it needs to be exactly the same center. Don't worry about it. It's an estimate. You could always move this around to make it perfectly center. And that's why it's good to have equal sides of space all around your hoop. So I want you to use your needle to poke what you think is the center of the hoop. And I'm just gonna say that that's my center. So that everybody found the hole that corresponds to the center of the hoop and you poke it with your needle. that a yes?
Yes.
Okay, I can tell. I feel like silences must be like I'm still doing it. So, okay. So now I'm gonna show you a little trick. Do you see this guy line here? This little triangles that are coming out of there and out of there? That is the pattern telling you that where those two little arrows or lines cross, that's the center of this pattern. So that's where we start with our cross stitch. There's people that'll tell you that technically you can start anywhere with your cross stitch, but it won't assure that it's perfectly centered on the fabric that you have. So that's why I always search for my center. So what I do is you kind of cross them, right? I'm doing it this way, but you could do it however way you want. But it seems to me that this little, oops, can you guys see the screen? Sorry, guys. Okay, can you guys see this little value here?
Yeah.
So did everybody came to that agreement that that seems to be the center?
Yep.
Of the pattern? Okay, so that there, now we're like basically playing like, what is that? Like the color coding, paint by colors. They're paint by colors, but with thread. So that is the letter E. And the letter E here corresponds to DMC 3760. So what you do now is you go to your trusty little palette that I gave you. And this is going to be different for you. It's going to look prettier because this was the working version of it. But you'll see that you should have some thread. I don't have any, but you should have some thread that reads 3760. So what you do is you take your thread. I'm hypothetically taking some thread out. And then you'll see that you have bundles of fabric, or I'm sorry, bundles of thread. And let me show you this with one that actually looks better. So this is a bundle of thread. And not only that, there's two in here. And you see how all of the threads kind of gather together and they separate? That's because I cut this. I cut this twice so that you have two threads. One rookie mistake that I did is that I thought that you thread all of these thread inside your needle. That is wrong. You thread whatever you think is good for to be able to fill out this space. I already done that math for you. And for Ida cloth, that is size 14, which is what we're working with, Ida cloth 14, you want 4 threads of your embroidery thread. How do I get my 4 threads? Well, there's 6 threads per bundle. You should be able to see them here. Do you see that there's 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3? Does everybody see that?
Yep. Yes.
So what you do is very gently, you pull the two threads away from the 4 threads. And so you thread your needle with this bundle of 4 threads, and you save this one for later, right? Because every bundle has 6 threads. If I need more, I could bundle this one. I can unite this one with the 2 other spare threads of the other bundle. So I'm just gonna keep on doing this slowly. And of course, it's like getting all tight. So just do it slowly. Another way that you could do it is 1 by 1. Sometimes I do it that way. Sometimes I get desperate and I do it 2. So just treat it slowly. It's gonna get tight if there's a lot of curves with the threads. So just do it slowly, take your time, and then at the end, you should be able to have 4 threads. How are we doing with that?
Okay, just trying to thread all 4.
Yes, that's the challenge. If it's being too difficult to thread the needle with that, cut it. And I don't know about you guys, but I like just basically put it in my mouth and flatten it with my saliva, and that does the trick. So what I will do is, if you still have your needle through the center, just kind of move it around, wiggle it, so that the hole becomes a little bit bigger. See how it's a little bit bigger? And now I can go back to it. So now I know that's the center. All right, let's thread that needle. How are we doing? Okay. So for needle threading, again, sometimes I use a lot of saliva. I guess you could use water. Like, I don't know, I just use this. Remember, I'm doing this when I'm watching TV, so water is not that easily accessible. So you pass it through. And just tell me how we're doing so that we can, I know this might be the most challenging part. I see Dana, you're like waiting, you're done. I love it. All right, it seems like Diane might be, and then Dr. Burisma too. So I'm gonna go ahead and go Saren too. All right, so while you're doing, the people that are threading, it's okay, take your time. What I want you to realize or know is that I always, when I thread, I leave a little bit. I don't know how much is this. That's like 2 inches, 3 inches, 2 inches of thread out of the needle. And so you see I have all of that little thread there, and then I have the rest of the thread on the other side. Okay, remember that center that we talked about? Now we're gonna be counting. So we're gonna say, how many do I have to go that way? So then I have to go back this way. So then you say like, oh, okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Sorry, I count in Spanish, that was 7. So what you do is that you know that if you're in the center, right, and I can see a little bit my centers. There you go, that's my center. Pass the thread through. Then you wait. You see that thread coming out? This is your backside. You hold it with your finger, whichever one is more comfortable, and you leave it there until you have done a couple of thread streaks, and always make sure that it's being wrapped around.
Dr. Recart González,
Yes.
do we go, I forgot the first one, do we go through the bottom?
Yes, through the bottom.
Through the
Always
bottom?
through the bottom. Because the bottom is what's gonna leave that thread out.
Okay, so through the bottom and then over to the upper right.
Exactly.
Okay, and
right.
then just keep that same thing until we go backwards.
Exactly. So if I'm flipping it, I'm super bad at flipping it this way for me. So if I threaded it right there, and then I flip it, you'll see that I'm still holding on to it. The next one that I have to do is actually right under there. So I make sure that my thread is like all nicely snug between that thread that I'm passing through. So that way it becomes locked. So
and how much of the tail are you leaving on the back side?
Keep on doing it for a couple of times. I will say you could keep on doing that because we're moving 7 squares that way. You might be able to cover the majority of it, and then you could do the thread cleaning later. And by thread cleaning, I mean you take your scissor and then you cut the threads that are either in your way or they're bothersome. But you first and foremost should make sure that this is as secure as possible. Because if this comes undone, all of your cross stitch will come undone.
Okay, got it.
So I'm gonna keep on doing the movement, right? Right now we're not going back. We're only going to the right. And I know this song is super old, but there's like a song that's like to the right, and to the left, to the left. So you're basically doing that. So you keep on doing that. Keep on flipping, looking where you're going. Now I have 3. And then you keep on going for your 4th. And I understand like some people are very like faster than me. Some people are slower than me. Just take your time. Have fun with this. So you have 4. And keep on going a little bit fast. 4, 5, 6. How are we doing?
Good.
Good.
When we go back from when we go from the bottom over to the right, then we go back under,
So,
right?
yeah, so let's finish this one the way that I want it to finish, right? So you'll notice, see that the thread, I hold on to it, and there's barely any left there. So now we made it to the 7, and just so that we have a reference again, if we count 7 squares, we're still using that thread, the E thread. We don't want to go more because that other square should be 1/2, which is DMC 3842, which we don't have threaded right now. We're not using that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna go back. Now know that at this point, right, you could go and do this one and then move this way. And then you can move this way. You could do it however you want, right? And fill it up however you want to. I'm gonna go back this way just so that I can show you a finished cross stitch line, okay? So another detail, right? Remember that we're always going this side first and then the other one this way. That makes it look pretty if you always do it the same way, whichever one you wanna do it, because you're always moving one thread under the other one in the same direction. So what we don't want to see is you going this way, and then once you start the other one, let's say you start doing this. I'm gonna do this wrong just so that you can see what I'm saying. Then you do this. See how like I started going the opposite way, and then I go to the other side, and then you do that. We don't want that. We want everything to be in the same direction, so it's all nice and pretty, and it has the same kind of surface and texture to it. Okay, so let's do this. Now what I'm gonna do is we're gonna move. From the 7s back to where we were going, just so that we can finish this and we can put you in your own groups and you can read the cross stitch pattern on your own. So I'm just gonna go this way.
So when you're going back, do you go back through the hole that you made?
Yes.
Before, okay.
Exactly. So it will end up looking, right, because you're always using the same hole, it will end up looking like this. Like you always have thread going in that same direction. And you'll notice, right, because you're always going to the upper left, right, once you go down, it's always gonna go through a part that you added thread. Does that make sense? And I think that was Sarah and Melissa?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So yeah, you keep on doing that. And so I'm gonna try to move fast, but like I said, I'm kind of slow. I couldn't do any cross stitching this weekend because I was binge watching Blind Manor, and I wanted to see all the ghosts. But you know, you take your time when you're watching a lot of TV. Okay, so I'm done, right? And so if you're done, let's pretend that we're out of thread. Say that we got almost to the end. Then that's the time. Don't do this. Don't do this. Please don't do this. But I just wanted to show you, right, how you finish it. So you're passing it under, pulling it out, and then you cut this little bit out. And you're done. And of course, you're not done. You have all of this to do, right? So you have a little bit of ways to go. And again, this is, you could get to here however you want to. The last thing that I want to say is there's videos on how to make a French knot. You'll notice that that says French knot and there's a circle there. The French knot is really cool. It makes like a little pearl. And I'm terrible at explaining it, but there's so many people making cool YouTube videos, and I swear every time that I want to do a French knot, I always end up searching on YouTube and finding how to do it again and again and again. The other thing that I wanted to say is about these letters. You'll notice that these letters are gonna be really complicated for you to do. Don't do this now. Do this when you feel very confident about this, because you'll notice here that you have very little space to be able to thread that black thread. So you want to make sure that you're feeling confident. Oftentimes too, in this back one, when you're doing this tiny little separate cross stitching, what people will do is make a nut. So if you make a nut, right, in one of the ends of it, when the needle follows through, it will get stuck on that hole. And I usually try to do a combination of doing a nut and of doing the holding of the thread and making sure that the back thread is going around it. And of course, I'm capable of making a thread right now, but you understand how to make a nut. And the last thing I want to say about this in particular, which I don't think it's in the rules here on the back, but I wrote it here so I could show you. These ones here, I want you to use 4 threads. All of these here are the little cross stitch, the X's. All of this is the X's. When you get to what says backstitch lines, it's the black thread. I want you to use 2 threads. And the same thing for the French knot. The reason is because if you do 4 threads, the clarity of your spelling is not gonna look well. It's gonna start blending because then you're adding, it's like bolded basically if you do 4 threads. So if you do 2 threads, it ends up coming out this way. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Right, so take your pen and pencil and write that because I know for sure I didn't add it to every single one. So make sure that you put 4 threads for this one and then 2 threads for this one. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
So once I'm done with my 7 X's, how do I get to the next row? And should I go up on the pattern or should I go down on the pattern?
However you want to get there.
But I should always start in the middle of the white circle, right?
Yeah, I should say you already started it by moving that line. So you're already perfectly centered. Now you can navigate however you want to on it. For me, I'm super bad at counting and saying like, oh, I want to like take care of this corner. I want to do the eye now. Navigating to the eye, for example, you have to count all of those squares and then you have to pass the needle exactly through where you want. So the way that I do it is I start filling in the pattern from the inside, the very center, all the way out. And when it's obvious what I'm supposed to do, then I keep on outlining it and tracking it. But I try to avoid counting because I personally am terrible at counting it. And once you start working on a corner, there's no coming back. You literally have to unthread everything you have done. And that's the most, in my opinion, the most depressing thing. That's where I give up on my cross stitch. And I say like, okay, well, I tried. So I don't want you to feel that way.
Dr. Recart González, how do we, okay, so I just did the first half of the first 7, and then when we go back, I go from bottom right to top left.
Yeah, exactly.
And then after that, then so now I'm under it.
Yeah,
after
so now you're under it, so then you're ready. You're ready to go either for the row that's up or the row that's below. So then you know that the thread that you have is the one that's color coded number E or like letter E, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know that you're on your E. And so that gives you some ability, right? Because it's threaded. You can go down on your pattern and then decide to go this way. And then you can keep on doing it. So nobody's stopping you from making all of your cross stitch just one direction this way. And then you fill out everything the other direction, right? Because at the end of the day, what you want is this X that's facing from the bottom left to the upper right to be the one that gets laid down on the bottom, and then the other one to be on the upward side. So like it's facing up.
I'm just confused on going from right to left. So I went back, trying to go back. So I went bottom right to upper left, and now it's behind. So then where do I go after?
So then you go to the next step that you want to do. So like, do you want to do do you want to do the upper part and your pattern? Where do you want to navigate with your thread?
Because we have to do an X on each E, right?
Yes, each
so
square.
I only did one square coming back, but now I'm confused on.
Can I see your pattern a little bit closer, or your cross stitch?
Does that look normal?
I think it does. If you can send me a picture, that will be great, maybe. But I will say that you keep on filling it, right? So you always have to have excess.
So I'm just confused. I did the first X going back from bottom right to upper left, and now I'm behind it. How do I do the other X? Do I go bottom?
You go bottom right to
again.
Upper left. Yeah, again.
Bottom right from behind.
Yes, from behind. So let me show you. Maybe this will help here. Tiffany, can you see my slides?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me navigate to this infographic. I think what happened in your case, I want to guess, is that you did this.
Yeah, I'm right there.
And then now your thread is on the back side, right? Mm-hmm. And so what you need to do is you need to move that thread now to come out here.
Oh, okay. So bottom left, straight, and then it goes straight down and then back around.
Yeah, exactly. And like this is relative, right? Because like at this point, like this was a bottom left, but now it's like your bottom right because you're moving to your upper left. So you could call it however you want to in a way that makes sense to you. But the end goal, right, is that you're having excess and that you always have one direction of the thread is always consistently going under, and then the other one is always consistently going in the upper side.
Okay, perfect. Yes, I got it. It was from 4 to 5.
Yeah.
That was 4 to 5.
It happens. So then I think that with that, it seems like most of you are like feeling the cross stitch addiction at this point. You're all quiet, focusing on your fabric, trying to like be fast and efficient and all that stuff. That's good stuff. So what I will do now while you do this is put you into groups. Again, take your time to like have, a couple of minutes doing it on your own, and then you can like be comfortable talking and cross stitching. I know I'm like jumping you into like, what is that when you go to the library and there's like the crafting grannies. I know it takes some experience to be able to do that, but I'm sure you will get a hang of it. Okay, so I'm gonna make breakout rooms. Do you guys feel comfortable going into your breakout rooms and chatting?
I have a quick question real quick.
Yes.
So after you fill up like the row and then you get to the back for step 6, how do you go about that again? So just go back under like that?
Yeah, and then just remember that you gotta have some sort of goal. So you finish your first goal, which was that row. Then now you have to find another goal, which could be maybe for you want to go and do the upper row, or maybe you want to do the bottom row. Doesn't matter, right? What you're doing is you're filling in the blanks using that strategy of making X's to fill in the color that is said here.
If I want to go above it, do I have to go like back through that again, or can I just go like up?
That's a great question. You can go back through the last hole that you passed the needle through because it will unravel. So in that case, you kind of like have to go to the other side and then do a little bit of this. So instead of doing this direction, you're doing this direction. So you're passing it through the two bottom, you're passing it to the upper right, going to the bottom left instead of the other way around.
So you don't always have to do like the one direction first and the other direction second. It's just like whichever one is there.
Yeah, as long as it lays the same way, right? Like we know that this one, even if you do it coming from here to there, it will lay on the same angle. It's not like you're doing this all of a sudden. You're still going this way.
Okay. And so first I would like go through all of these
You don't have to, that's at the end. So that's when you're done with your thread. When you're done with your thread, that's when you do that part. And you'll get a feeling of when you're done with your thread, when you are having a hard time passing it through, or like you have too little thread or whatever, then you say, no, I'm just gonna pass it under and just start with a fresh set of threads. And remember that at that point, then you like have to separate those two, set them aside, use the 4. Now you have 2 sets of 2 right on the side, which you can then use. So you'll be using a lot of this color E, or whatever that number is.
Okay, thank you so much.
Do we pass it through after we're done with one row once, or did you go back and forth before you cut it? Or before you started a new row?
You basically go back to the beginning, because I want you to have that experience, right? So you ended up, you started at the center, went out of the center, went back to the center. And then at that point, you need to make a decision. Do you want to do the upper row or the lower row? And then depending on which one, you keep on doing the X's in the same direction. Just note that I think for the upper one, going from the bottom left to the upper right, you'll notice that your thread will come undone because that's the last thread that you went in.
Okay. But it's okay to just seal it too. But when when you sealed it, did you only go under once through your row?
Yes. You could go multiple. I mean, I will recommend maybe, I didn't go I went multiple times, but I don't want you to seal it because you still have thread. Sealing is when you're out of thread.
Okay, got it.
If you seal it right now, don't worry about it. You have plenty of spare ones to work. I think you all have double the thread that I use on my cross stitch, so you have flexibility, some flexibility in there. If you keep yourself efficient, you should probably use the same amount of thread that I use.
So if I sealed it, can I keep going, or do I have to cut that? On those steps?
Okay, so it depends. I think this is the beginning, Tiffany. So what I will do is, if you can unthread your needle and try to take out the sealing that you did out, and then thread it back again, and just pretend that you didn't unseal it, or like you didn't seal it. I think it will pay off better than starting with new thread again.
Oh, so go back.
Yeah, let me show you real quick what I mean, because I just did that. And then I want to open the breakout rooms for everybody. So let me make sure that I'm gonna recreate the breakout rooms. Okay, now I have, so Tiffany, you could stay, and if anybody's interested in troubleshooting this, you can stay. I'm gonna be opening the breakout room so that you can go there. I'll stay in the main call, so if you ever need my help, you can always come back to me and we can talk about it. So opening all the rooms right now. Okay, and then I'm gonna share my phone again and do that thing. Are you guys seeing this?
It's still your PowerPoint.
Oh, it's still my PowerPoint. Okay, I need a second. Maybe I just need to do my version again. So that's not the one, that's the final. This is the one that I finished, and I show you how to went under. So what I want you to do is, if I know where my needle is, so I still thread it. What I want you to do is I want you to go in the corner of where you did all that, and then I want you to kind of poke it through. Let's try to get that out of there again. And then if it's not working, you can abort, but I think it should work.
Poke it through as in go back under the other way?
So you see how this might not be, you know what?
Oh, should I just try to undo it?
I wanted you to undo it, but I fear that it might be too late.
Yeah.
So if you can undo it, it will be basically going on the last stitch that you used to go under, right? And then you see how I'm kind of like pulling it out. But if you're going that route, you have to make sure that you have all of the threads there. And I honestly feel like it might be too late. So
yeah, I think it's
let's just do this. So you can cut it. I can show you how to cut these, right? So you get your trusty little scissors or snips, and then you snip. And then now you still have your thread. So now, because you still have all of this, you don't want to make this go to waste. So what you do is you take your needle again and you thread it, and you have to do similar steps that you were doing. So you need to start at a point wherever you want, bottom or top, wherever you want, and then you keep on doing it. So remember to make sure that you're going in the right direction, right? So you hold the thread, and then you keep on going in the same direction.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Dr. Recart González, could you show an example of starting a new row?
Yes, I could do that. So I'm gonna pretend that I need to start a new row with only 2. So let's just say that I was just doing a tiny little corner. And my needle came unthread again. Okay, so do you see what I'm doing? I should have brought like black embroidery thread. So I'm just gonna like go ahead and do this, right? I'm gonna pretend that I went back. Okay, so now I'm back, I'm done with that one. And now I say, oh, I wanna keep on going up. So remember that I told you that my last thread that I put was this one here, and it came through here, this hole. So if I go through that hole again, chances are that it's gonna come undone. See? So what you do is pass it through. Pass it through, right? Sorry, I had some spillage of the other one, so there's a thread poking out. Usually kind of like you can poke those back in, but for time, I'm just gonna show you the way to start a new row. So instead of going from that corner, I'm doing the opposite direction. So I'm going from the top right to the bottom left. And then you keep on going in the same direction. So it's still bottom left to top right. And you keep on going. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else on the call with me that has any questions?
Dr. Hackard, when I start the new row, my first one will be the top left. The bottom. It will be essentially the top left of one of the squares that are already there, correct?
I don't know. So let me look at the pattern because I don't quite know what you mean by that, but maybe you can point it out while I'm looking at it.
So like on the first row that we did, when we start another row, essentially, are we starting from the top left of the already cross-stitched square?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
got it.
yes.
Okay.
So you're keeping at everything so that it becomes like this, right? So there's no space, there's no white space between this
Got it.
and that. So it's all continuous.
And we're going from the bottom up for the first time again.
Yeah, or like whichever way feels comfortable to you, right? Like literally you could go, I'm exaggerating again just so that you could see the tape. You could go this direction, right? You could go this direction. There's nothing stopping you from going that direction or from going this direction. As long as your end product will have a positive relationship, right? You have a slope that's going, if you have this x-axis, right? Things are increasing with your slope. As opposed to like having a line that looks negative, which would be, like that. You don't want this one to be your first one. Maybe I should not do it there, but really do it here. So you don't want this to be your first line. You always want it to be this direction. However you get there, it's how you get there, and that's part of how you cross stitch, and that's okay.
Yeah, so it's always going to be bottom left to top right first.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then on your way back, you're adding this one.
The opposite.
Yeah, and you can literally do all of this, like all of this pattern. One time is going this direction, and then you finish all of this E, and then you go back through everything, and then you do the other way. Right, like there's no time sensitivity about adding the top line.
Okay, got it. Okay, should we go back to the breakout room?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, thank you. I'll see you in a bit.
Yep, of course. And then do I have any other questions?
I just had a question about if you're starting to run low on your thread, should I try and like finish off the squares that I've started, or should I finish just going in one direction and then come back with a separate piece of thread?
Yeah, it depends on how much thread you have left. So I will say, and let me try to go back to my little station. I will say, if you have this much thread, you still have a long way to go.
Mm-hmm.
If you have, and I'm gonna pull this just to give you an idea of how little thread is too little. If you have that much thread, you're done.
Okay.
Like on the side. And so what you do is you basically pull under, right, all of the other work that you did, and then you pass it through, and then now this is locked, and you cut it, and you're done.
Okay.
You do want to be as efficient as possible, but you also want it to be something comfortable. So it may look different given like your hand and the space that you're working in. That may look different, and that's okay.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Hi, everybody. Okay, so welcome back. Can I see the cross stitches? Let's see the progress. Yes, Dr. Burisma, yes, the sea of blue, and then Lee. Alexa, you too. Oh my God, that's amazing. You guys have the potential to like really go to town and do those like pixel art cross stitches things because you're so fast at it. It's crazy. I like take forever, so I always do like small victories cross stitch. All right, so I hope this was fun. I wanted to be honest to your time, so it is 6:02. You're more than welcome to keep on cross stitching here. And then the other thing that I wanted to do is, if you guys had any conversations related to the questions that we had, I wanted to see whether you will be willing to share what you talked about in this particular link. So it's gonna be a poll everywhere. So that link should take you to that. And then as you guys start adding responses, a world cloud hopefully will start appearing. And it's okay if what you have to say is cross stitching is fun, or cross stitching is not my thing. Or the Tecopa pupfish is so pretty. It's okay if it's that. Love a tiny little fish. I love it. I guess I ended up with a word cloud instead of or the quotation cloud instead of the word cloud. In the zone, yes, cross stitching will do that to you.
Helena said something about there being another cross stitching event at some point. I don't think that one went out to the big group. I think that might have just gone to bio students or something. Is there any way to get in on that? If
yeah,
a bio student.
Yeah, so priority was given to bio students, and we are filled with that one, so registration is full. But also I encourage you to contact me, and we all have our email. So if you ever wanted to have more time to just cross stitch, we could also just have a Zoom where we just jump in and cross stitch. You have some materials and you can continue working with the Tecopa pupfish, or you can work on something else. So Lee, I don't know if that will be of interest to you, but I will be up for doing something like that.
Cross stitch hangout sounds awesome. Oh my god.
Oh my God, yes. I'm totally in.
Awesome. Okay, so what I will say is that if someone can get it started and going off, I'll definitely show up with my cross stitch and show and troubleshoot if anybody's having any problems. So are you guys okay if I share emails with everybody? So right now you were all like BCC in emails. Okay, so I'll send a message to everybody. Cool. All right, so we have some answers. So we have de-stressing, yes. Traffic, dynamics are yummy. I wish we had time to like really talk about these word clouds, but I love it. Fun yet challenging. Awesome. All right, so with this word cloud, am I still sharing it, I suppose? So you're seeing what's coming in? All right, so I'll leave it on. You guys can keep on hanging out. You can keep on talking if you want to. I could put you back into breakout rooms. But I think on my end, you're free to go and have fun. Thank you for coming. And also, I'm not kicking you out, but also I want to say that the thank you part before we all leave in a weird way.
Thank you so much, Dr. Recart González.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, bye. And you can hang out. I'm sorry I keep on saying bye.